What impact could this ruling have on the pending discrimination case against Harvard?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, and it's a hyper-conservative court, and they decided that what Virginia was doing, the Jefferson High School, was legitimate. And one of the things that's unique about what Jefferson High School was doing from Harvard and UNC is that they took a race-neutral approach. They said that they wanted to increase diversity, but all of the changes that they made were race neutral. And so the effect of it, even though we saw a decline in Asian enrollment is still more than double what it is in the district. And so it'll be interesting to see if there's more nuance than perhaps we may expect when they rule on Harvard and UNC this fall.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sherrod, I want to bring you in because, listen, I think when you look at it on the surface and you say, oh, wait, API student enrollment is plummeting, that might cause concern for some people. But Ivory just made the really good point. It's still more than double some other people. So for folks who do feel a way about this, what are your thoughts on this situation?
I think it really boils down to how much you are interested in diversity as an objective. And this, I think, is a completely valid issue for schools to be considering. It seems to be something that the court is at least giving some deference, temporarily at least, to the schools to make these choices. And as you say, there's still, in some ways, there's more diversity when we allow these types of policies that are looking at recruiting students from across the state that we're not using these testing requirements. They do seem to have the effect at the end of the day of broadening diversity. And at the end, I think that is a good thing.
Yeah, and that's what this is all about, right? Like classrooms starting to look like America. I have to say, Ivory, it's really interesting that we're discussing this week after we found out that Harvard is trying to make amends for enslavement as well. The news broke this week that Harvard is trying to reckon with its past. They had people who were enslaved who worked for faculty there, served students in various capacities. So the university is going to establish a $100 million fund to actively address the impact of slavery. As we see these wars on, this imaginary villain of CRT, and we see, the counteract to that is to keep fighting for diversity. I'm curious your thoughts on what equality will look like in the classroom, because a lot of these Republican-led wars impact the classroom directly, from, K through 12 to higher ed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, all of the anti-CRT rhetoric, it really has nothing to do with CRT. It has to do with neutralizing any discussion of race. I'm happy to see that Harvard is dealing with that. It's long overdue, and all institutions need to look at their racist past and their contribution to not only the enslavement of African Americans, but the denial of rights of African Americans. When it comes to this whole issue of how do we diversify schools and including higher education and the use of standardized tests, one thing that we have to recognize is that we've been using standardized tests for decisions in incorrect ways for probably all of their existence. Standards for educational psychological testing, they have very strict parameters on how to use standardized tests for decision making. And the way that we currently use them violates all of the rules that's set in Chapter 3 of this report that's endorsed by the American Psychological Association. So the elimination of standardized tests, or the different use of standardized tests, is much more in line with what's constitutionally correct and in line with the standards of the profession.
Sherrod, I want to ask you, because I think something that is a big misconception for people who are not closely following this is people think there are droves of people in the API community who are fighting against affirmative action, when that's not true at all. Most people in the API community support affirmative action, but Students for Fair Admissions, this is the group that filed the lawsuit, it's led by a right-wing activist, an extremist, some might say, Edward Bloom, who has continued to position people in the API community and weaponize communities of color against each other. What can you say about the community's opinion on affirmative action, and why were some people willing to be used as a pawn for this guy?
Yeah, I think it's super unfortunate. I mean, like you say, this is a misnomer in the general public. Is that I would say by and large, Asian Americans are supportive of affirmative action, and even a bigger issue is that this case that is coming in front of the Supreme Court has very little on the merits to do with affirmative action, even though it's being spun this way and ultimately might actually spell the end of affirmative action. I don't think any of that is necessary, and so there is the main concern in this case is that there is discrimination against some Asian American students. But the remedy, if that is found to be the case, need not be to eliminate affirmative action. These are entirely different issues, but yet for strategic political reasons, the case is being spun as a referendum on affirmative action itself.